Esports revenue. With the esports industry now worth more than $1 billion, it seems incredible to some people that so much money can be generated just from people playing video games. When the first competitions were played in arcades back in the 80s, it's doubtful that anyone could have predicted that competitive video gaming would get so big. In this chapter, we'll be looking at where exactly the money comes from. You'll have the opportunity to learn about the different sources of esports revenue and how much an event can actually bring in. We'll also be examining the link between traditional sports revenues and whether esports can learn anything from them in terms of extracting more cash from its sources. The chapter will take a look at how much the average fan spends on esports and whether the competitions depend too much on fans for revenue. We'll also be taking a look at the link between game publishers and events. Do game publishers and developers have too much control over the industry? One of the biggest reasons for the explosion of growth of esports was that game publishers realized that regular competitions were a great way for promoting a game and building a strong fan base who would consistently play the game long after its release. This chapter will explore this link and look at why some of the biggest esports competitions are marketing tools for games publishers. With the growth of esports seemingly increasing each year, prize pools for major competitions get bigger. Fortnite's recent World Cup event was the biggest ever prize pool, giving out more than $60 million in prizes to players who took part. Most of the major tournaments on the circuit now have multi-million-dollar prizes available for the top players, which is incredible when you think that just 20 years ago, the sport barely existed at all.
What do Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, Drake, Miami Heat, Amazon, the 76ers, and the German football team FC Schalke have in common? They have all invested into esports. A single esports tournament final can have a larger viewership than the final game of the NHL Stanley Cup or a finals match at Wimbledon. The top teams can bring in revenue of over $20 million. The International Dota 2 Championships, a one-week esports tournament, has a prize pool of $30 million. Compare that to the NBA Championship Players Prize Pool of $22 million. And Fortnite is awarding $100 million of competition money in total for the whole year. Universities are setting up esports teams and leagues. The president of Indonesia is talking about it. And esports has been added to the Chinese graduate curriculum. And on October 2018, the cover of ESPN magazine featured a gamer. Even people from professional sports are jumping ship. Former CEO of the NFL and ESPN, Steve Bornstein, now works for the gaming publisher Activision Blizzard. And so does the former senior vice president of team marketing and business operations of the NBA, Brandon Snow. The excitement and buzz around esports comes down to the growing number of people watching it. The Stanley Cup had 8.7 million viewers for the final game. The League of Legends Championship was broadcasted in 19 languages and had 99 million viewers for the finals. The NBA Finals viewership hit just over 20 million viewers. And this is why you see more and more media deals being made. ESPN made a multi-year deal for live TV coverage of the Overwatch League by Activision Blizzard, which is also being streamed on Disney platforms. Brands are pouring money into sponsoring esport teams and events. As esports has grown, sponsorships have gone from niche tech brands to mainstream ones, such as Adidas, Domino's, and Coca-Cola. There is even the new Pizza Hut Stadium, the first ever sponsorship deal for a virtual stadium, to be used for the Madden NFL Championship eSports series. Even individuals are making big sponsorship deals. Ninja, who was the front-page star of ESPN magazine, has signed sponsorship deals with the likes of Samsung, Uber Eats, and Red Bull, and he can earn upwards of 7 figures a month playing video games and streaming from home, all because there are so many people watching him. The reason why there are more and more people watching esports is because of the accessibility. Competition is fun, but traditional sports can be hard for everyone to participate in. Basketball courts and football pitches require a lot of space and money to build, and each sport is suited for specific body types. For the inaugural Fortnite World Cup, 40 million players from around the world participated in trying to qualify to make it to the tournament where 100 players competed. Also, the number of competitive games that are being turned into esports keeps on growing. Take a video game such as FIFA for playing soccer. FIFA has its own eWorld Cup, but you also have countries creating their own professional esport leagues. The Premier League in England have just started their own esports FIFA league. MLS have their own competitive league as well, and more independent leagues are being created. And that's just for soccer. Other sports have their own esports leagues as well, from the NFL to Formula 1, while Major League Baseball has launched a league in China. Then there are leagues just for universities. Students are getting full scholarships for being esport players. They are competing with other universities nationally and around the world. There are also leagues and competitions within the universities themselves. The same thing is also happening on a high school level. With all this massive growth, there are 3 main ways that people are investing into esports. The first way is by investing directly into teams. People are also investing into esport companies such as gaming publishers, and you even have real estate investments such as arenas, hotels, and bars. A lot of big names are investing directly into esport teams, Shaquille O'Neal being one as part owner of the NRG team. In 2016, the Philadelphia 76ers became the first North American sports team to own an esports team. For some esport leagues, you need to buy a franchise to compete. For League of Legends, it cost $10 million for a franchise in 2017. Now they're being valued at over $50 million, while Overwatch franchises were being sold for $20 million and are now valued at $60 to $80 million. Top team organizations can bring in upwards of $20 million a year, and the top esport team companies can have a value of up to $310 million. Esports teams can make money in a number of ways, from winning prize pools and tournaments, signing brand sponsorship deals, and selling merchandise, to streaming, creating other forms of content, and hosting their own events. Ali Myth Kabani, a player with Team Solo Mid, became the second biggest streamer on Twitch. Chipotle then went on to sign a deal worth up to 7 figures with the team. Team Liquid is one of the biggest esports team brands. With facilities in Netherlands and now North America, Team Liquid has a growing number of teams that compete in a number of esport games. Their team, who won the Dota 2 championships, took home $10.8 million in prize money. Professional sports teams, from Premier League football clubs to Formula 1 teams, are signing players to represent them in the esports world. They're all investing into their esports teams because for a sport like Formula 1, esports represents a big opportunity for getting a generation of new fans to watch the real-life sport. There's so much potential in how an esports team can connect with fans and large audiences and bring in money. This is why you see so many people making investments into teams. Here are a few names of people who have invested directly into esports teams. Hall of Famer Magic Johnson, AOL co-founder Steve Case, Golden State Warriors co-owner Peter Guber, the New York Yankees, Dan Gilbert, founder of Quicken Loans and owner of the NBA team Cleveland Cavaliers, Drake, and Michael Jordan. As esport teams have been taking on private investments, there have also been private investments made into esport-specific startups and companies, such as Drake, who invested in a company called Players Lounge, who host gaming tournaments. There are also a number of companies in the esports industry that are listed on stock exchanges that are being invested into. A number of these companies are game publishers. Gaming publishers build the games that the esports are based on. As a result, these game developers own all of the rights surrounding the game. Here are some ways game publishers are making money. Through broadcasting deals and media rights and online streaming rights, selling franchises in their leagues, licensing their games to external league organizers, merchandise, hosting events, sponsorship deals such as the virtual stadium Pizza Hut has sponsored through EA Games, and through game sales and in-game purchases to the wider general audience. Here are a few game developers who are listed on stock exchanges. Activision Blizzard is the publisher of game titles World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Call of Duty, StarCraft, Hearthstone, Diablo, and more. They launched their Overwatch eSports League in 2017, just a year after the game was launched. The selling of their franchises have gone from $20 million to now over double, and they have broadcasting deals with Disney and ESPN. Electronic Arts is the publisher of the games Apex Legends, FIFA, NHL, Madden NFL, and more. Take-Two created NBA 2K and Grand Theft Auto. And then there is Tencent, the largest gaming company in the world. They own 40% of Epic Games, which owns Fortnite, a 10% stake in Bluehole Studios, publisher of PlayerUnknown's Battleground, a 5% stake in Activision Blizzard, and a 5% stake in Ubisoft. Riot Games, who is the publisher of League of Legends, is fully owned by Tencent. Owners of League of Legends teams include the owners of the Washington Wizards, the Houston Rockets, the Los Angeles Dodgers, and life coach Tony Robbins. While Amazon bought Twitch, the live streaming platform for gamers which is banned in China, Tencent invested in Huya, which is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and Douyu, listed on the Nasdaq, two companies that are the leading live streaming platforms for esports in China. Millions of dollars have also been invested in creating different esport real estate projects. If you have bars where people can go and watch traditional sports games, have drinks, eat, and be surrounded by TV screens, sporting memorabilia, and decor, then why not have the same thing for esports? From France, Spain, Switzerland, and Germany, all the way to Canada and Portland, esports bars are popping up all over the world. One esports bar, Meltdown, has 27 locations around the world. Taking it up another step are hotels that are catering to esport players and fans. There is the iHotel in Taiwan that has been designed for esports teams to practice together, but anyone can come, stay, and play. Each room, from a single-person to a six-person team room, comes with gaming machines. There is also a 12-person gaming area in the lobby with top-of-the-line gaming computers. iHotel have expanded and now have multiple hotels in Taipei. And lastly, you have real estate projects that are building independent e-sporting arenas, like the Cyber Games Arena in Hong Kong. The space hosts training areas, a competitive arena for up to 80 players, and streaming and television broadcast studios. It also has a VR zone, cafe, mobile gaming zone, and a stage. Cyber Games Arena is looking to host over 100 local and international competitions a year, but anyone can come and play themselves. Hourly rates to use the computers start at $3. The arena is expected to bring in 1.2 million visitors a year, and the entire project cost $3.8 million to build. It's just another way people are investing into the esports industry, an industry where the winner of a tournament can make more money than Tiger Woods winning a PGA Masters, an industry that can sell out the Staples Center and Madison Square Garden, an industry that could reach 645 million viewers by the year 2022, about double the population of the United States. The best investments into esports will be the ones that are centered around the fans, investments that build the best relationships with them.
Streaming rights. As with traditional sports, streaming and media rights are one of the biggest sources of revenue for esports. Around 25% of traditional sports revenue is made up just from broadcasting and media rights. This means that a quarter of the revenue comes from media companies, including TV channels and online streaming platforms. For eSports, the figure is currently at 18% of the total revenue, although this is expected to increase to 24% by 2021. For many years, eSports was regarded as too niche or uninteresting for a lot of major TV channels in the West. While the sport was rapidly gaining new fans in Asia, where fans could watch live matches on TV, most of Europe and North America had limited exposure to the sport. Now, of course, eSports can be found on a large number of popular online platforms. Many TV channels, including the likes of ESPN, pay organizers for the rights to show eSports events. Twitch, the online gaming stream platform, is now one of the most popular ways for fans to watch eSports. The platform pays millions of dollars each year for the rights to show live events. Twitch had recently owned the exclusive rights to show the Overwatch League, one of the sport's biggest and most popular competitions. For a 2-year deal, Twitch paid $90 million for the rights to show the events live on its platform. The Overwatch League channel was one of the most watched channels on Twitch, showing that the deal definitely brought in a lot of viewers. However, Twitch recently lost out on the rights to rivals YouTube, who signed a multi-year deal for exclusive rights to show Activation eSports, including Overwatch, on its platform. While the exact terms of the agreement are unknown, it's thought to have blown the deal with Twitch out of the water. As media companies fight each other over the rights to stream live esports events, the amount of money that leagues can potentially make will grow. Considering both YouTube and Twitch earn hundreds of millions a year, it's unlikely that either will allow the other to buy all of the available rights without a fight. For these online platforms, growing viewing figures is important as they make most of their money from advertising. It's unlikely that Twitch is able to make more than $45 million from the Overwatch League streams a year. The site had a goal of $1 billion in advertising revenue, and Overwatch content alone only accounted for just under 3% of total views on the site. Twitch does have other sources of revenue, of course, but online platforms like YouTube and Twitch are more focused on keeping competitors out of the esports market than creating direct revenue. These platforms are also planning for the future. If esports are to continue growing, then building users now by investing in live esports content is a great way to prepare for the future. Sponsorships. Sponsorships are the second biggest source of revenue for both traditional sports and esports. A sponsorship involves two parties, the rights holder and the sponsor. The rights holder is the esports organization, team, competitor, or other company. The sponsor is a company which wants to associate its brand with esports and gain exposure amongst esports fans. Brand exposure is the number one reason for sponsorship, although it can also sometimes be used to directly sell a product or service to fans. Building brand awareness by creating a close relationship is much more effective than simply trying to sell a product, however. Fans are also unlikely to accept a sponsorship from a brand that doesn't fit well with the team or organization that it's sponsoring. For these reasons, sponsors need to think carefully about how they choose to spend their marketing money. Sponsors can be highly effective for building brand identity and awareness, but there are many cases of marketing departments which have failed to understand the fans of the event or team they are sponsoring. Many companies are also turning to esports athletes for endorsements. An endorsement is when a brand pays an athlete to recommend or use their product or service. In esports, just as in regular sports, some of the biggest brands are now getting involved. In previous years, sponsors were fairly limited and tended to be from companies involved in the gaming industry. Early esports events were often sponsored by game companies, PC parts manufacturers, and other brands related to gaming. These days, those sponsorships still feature, but large companies with mainstream appeal are starting to take notice. Companies like Red Bull, Nike, and BMW have all recently signed partnerships with esports organizations. Red Bull recently launched a campaign featuring the world's most famous esports competitor, Ninja. It's not known how much Red Bull paid for the deal, but considering Ninja makes over $10 million a year playing video games, it's likely to be a lot. Sports brand Nike recently signed a partnership with one of the world's biggest esports events, the League of Legends Pro League. Nike has historically sponsored some of the world's greatest athletes, and to see them now spending nearly $150 million to feature at the event is a sign of esports' new popularity. The deal involves all players, coaches, and anyone involved at the event wearing Nike, and millions of fans around the world will be exposed to the brand while watching the Pro League. BMW recently shifted its marketing focus to the esports industry. The German car manufacturer sponsored 5 different esports teams across the United States, China, Germany, and South Korea. According to BMW's head of brand experience, the younger generation doesn't really care about TV or traditional advertising. Esports is our tool to reach them. Mercedes-Benz has a similar approach and has sponsored several esports events, including the ESL, one of the world's biggest esports organizations. Brands are increasingly recognizing that younger generations are more receptive to different forms of advertising, and if brands want to continue to be successful in the future, the key is to capture the attention of younger people. Fans of esports may not be about to buy Mercedes or BMWs right now, but in 10 or 20 years, these brands will already have a strong reputation amongst esports fans.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back here to the world of esports. Now we have a nice little piece set up for you here. It's about sponsorships. And no, we're not talking about your team sponsorships of getting a server and being very happy with that. We're talking about money, and we're talking to Intel about what they've been doing over this last decade and what they're doing in the future.
The number one story that we want to tell is that esports runs on Intel. My name is Lee Matchin. I am in Intel's sales division, and I'm our general manager of sales for PC gaming. And what that means is that across all the products that we sell that are relevant to gamers or OEMs that build PCs for gaming, it's my job to make sure that customers and end users understand the value of our products and that we remove any roadblocks to them building our products into gaming machines. I was a very avid gamer, and then like a lot of people, I had a job and kids, and that sort of dropped as far as gaming hours that I had to work with. The reason we're so excited about esports now and are so broadly invested in esports is because it's the single best way to get in front of huge numbers of people and explain the value of our products. Roughly 400 million people are going to watch an esports event at some point this year, and we want to be involved in leagues and tournaments so that the majority of those fans hear our story, see our brand, experience or watch people playing games on our products. Because, it's the most scalable way for us to get in front of that many people. eSports is perfect for us because it runs on PCs and Intel-based servers, and the people watching are generally watching on Intel-based PCs. And when those people want to play those same games, they're also playing on Intel-based PCs. So we think it's perfect that it literally runs on Intel, as well as the people watching and playing are also using Intel-based products. We've been involved in eSports since we're in season 15 of Intel Extreme Masters right now, and we've actually been working with ESL on eSports since even before that. So we've been involved in this for a long time, since before Twitch, since before it was a spectator sport, and you know, we're very fortunate to have been here all along the way, and to still be here working with companies like ESL now that eSports has become the ridiculously large global thing that it's become now. As a salesperson, the thing that I'm looking for the most is where is their interest in gaming and esports, and can we work with ESL and possibly bring an event there that will just accelerate that growth and that rising interest in gaming and in PCs overall. I think that's happening here in India, and this event seems to be going extremely well, and I'm hopeful that we'll all decide that it's a market that we want to come back to over and over again, and that we'll see the results in both gaming interest and PC sales. I can think of, you know, half a dozen other countries that I would love to do the same thing. Obviously, we can't do events everywhere every year, but you know, there's other countries in Asia and in Europe and South America where I think similar things can happen.
If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, because if you do, I've heard that Intel will send you a brand new i9 processor.
Tickets and merchandise. While much of esports fans prefer to watch events through live streams, most major events will also offer tickets to fans to watch the events in person at an arena. The amount of revenue earned through ticket sales will obviously depend on the size of the event and the country it's being held in. In countries like South Korea and China, fans regularly pack into purpose-built esports arenas. The Zhongchang Esports Stadium in China is the largest of its kind and fits 7,000 people. In the US, some arenas specifically designed for esports events have been built in recent years. While these tend to be smaller, holding a few thousand people, bigger events are regularly held at some of the country's biggest arenas. Around 20,000 fans packed into the Staples Center in Los Angeles for the 2016 League of Legends World Championship Finals. While ticket sales to events don't form as large a proportion of revenue for the biggest events, they still represent a significant factor. Live fans are an important part of any live sporting event and can enhance the atmosphere of the game and improve the optics of the event for fans watching on live streams. Seeing an arena packed with thousands of people always makes a live event more exciting, even if you're not actually at the event and are just watching at home. Ticket prices for the League of Legends World Championships in 2019 were priced between $16 and $90, depending on the stage of the competition and the ticketing level itself. Clearly, the biggest esports events aren't pricing out fans or attempting to make much of a profit from ticket sales. As a result, esports event planners are rewarding by seeing larger numbers of fans come to watch events. Considering how easy it is to access live esports streams, it makes sense for organizers to price tickets appropriately. Smaller events may have similar ticket prices, but these events aren't supported by large sponsorships or video game publishers. It presents a unique challenge to organizers of smaller scale esports events where ticket prices are an important part of revenue but still need to be competitive. Merchandising forms a significant part of the revenue for these smaller events. Most esports events, just as with music, entertainment, and sports, will produce merchandise for fans to buy at the events. This merchandise will also be available for fans to buy online, and one of the big positives of online streaming is that organizers can sell merchandise directly to fans using streams. Twitch even has capabilities for viewers to purchase items on Amazon directly while watching a stream. In 2016, a total of $45 million was spent by esports fans on tickets and merchandise. That figure has grown significantly to $103 million, but it still only represents a small amount of the total revenues of the industry. Despite this, ticketing and merchandise are both important to the overall success of esports. Many smaller events and esports teams rely on the sale of merchandise, and ticket sales also help to create exciting atmospheres for live events. Game publishers. A video game publisher is the company behind producing and releasing a game. For most video games, there will generally be a developer and a publisher. The developer is the team that creates the game which the publisher funds. The publisher will handle most of the business decisions of the game and will sometimes have an input on the development. For games publishers, esports are an excellent way to advertise a game, and many of the world's largest video game publishers are now focusing their efforts on releasing esports-ready games. For a game to be esports-ready, it needs to be optimized for competitive play. This means that the game is balanced, has enough depth to allow for different play styles and strategies, and is fun and exciting to play. Game publishers own the rights to their games, and esports events organizers will need to pay these fees to feature the games. Alternatively, many esports events are organized by the publishers themselves. This is the case for the Overwatch League, the League of Legends World Championship, the International, the Call of Duty World League, the FIFA Interactive World Cup, and many more. Major games publishers such as Valve, Riot, Blizzard, and Activision all have strong links to esports and have helped to grow the industry as we know it today. Independent organizers will need to pay game publisher fees on top of prizes and event overheads, which can be prohibitively expensive. While there is a lot of money to be made from advertising, sponsorships, and media rights, it can be a gamble, and some of the biggest independent organizations have struggled in the past. For this reason, the vast majority of major esports competitions are now run by the games publishers themselves. These companies may actually lose money on events or barely break even, but esports have become a powerful way for publishers to prolong the product life cycle of their games. The development process for a modern video game is a long and often costly one. Publishers risk a lot by investing tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars into the launch and marketing of new titles. If a game only makes money from its initial sale, it will need to sell a lot to make a return on that investment. For that reason, many game companies regularly release additional content in the game for players to buy. That way, revenue keeps coming in from the game long after its initial release. In recent years, The eSports model has become a way for a game to continue to grow its fan base long after release. Esports-focused games will be careful to build up the community of fans and release regular content that keeps players enjoying the game and continues to create revenue for the publishers. Because video game publishers control much of the esports industry, the sport is still markedly different from traditional sports in ways that are both good and bad. Any independent esports company will need to pay for the license to use any data, content, or anything else that relates to a game. This means that publishers run most esports competitions, and as yet, there isn't a single governing body that sets unified rules. The system may work for now, but if esports wants to continue to grow, it may need to change its model. Esports organizational structure. We have already loosely covered some aspects of esports organization structure in previous chapters. You should by now be aware that governing bodies, leagues and events, esports teams and game publishers all make up the core structure of the industry. Each of these groups play its own part in how the esports industry is run. In this chapter, we'll be going into more detail on these different groups and exploring the key aspects of each. You'll be able to see what exactly goes on behind the scenes of the esports industry and who's in charge of what. Understanding the organizational structure of any industry is important because it helps you to know how it operates and how it can be improved. You'll be able to see how the structure of esports parallels the structure of traditional sports in many ways and what sets it apart. Esports is a relatively new industry, so a lot of how the industry works can change in a short amount of time. We'll also be looking at what future changes may happen in the industry and how this may affect the organizational structure. Governing bodies. Governing bodies are independent organizations within a sport or practice that set the regulations and guidelines of the competition. In sports, these will include organizations such as FIFA, the IOC, and the Commonwealth Games Federation. These organizations set rules and ensure that fair play practices are followed. In some cases, they may also organize events, allocate funding to teams, and create awards. Most sports will have a single unified governing body that is heavily involved in the organization and setup of the sport. This organization will control the unified rules and will also provide guidelines for other governing bodies to act. There will often be smaller, local governing bodies which organize local sport on a smaller scale. In esports, governing bodies aren't quite as involved in the day-to-day running of the sport. As we covered in an earlier chapter, South Korea was the first country to set up its own esports governing body, the Korea Esports Association. Since then, other countries have followed suit. In terms of a single unified governing body which controls the sport, many separate efforts have been attempted. There was the International eSports Federation, the World eSports Consortium, and the World eSports Association. All of these governing bodies have tried to unify the sport and create a single set of rules and regulations that applies across companies and leagues to professionalize the sport. The World eSports Association was formed in 2016 and represents the best effort so far to create a single esports governing body. It was formed by the ESL, the world's largest esports company, and several professional esports teams. The World eSports Association hopes that it can remove inconsistencies in rules and help to fight for fair treatment of teams and esports competitors. As ESL is the largest esports company, outside of games publishers themselves, it has a lot of power in the industry. It runs the majority of the most popular independent esports leagues and competitions, so it makes sense for the organization to help unify the sport. The World eSports Association has also formed the Player Council, whose members will be chosen by the players themselves. This council will advocate for better rights for esports competitors and will have an input on rule changes, schedules, and more. By itself, however, ESL can't change much outside the rules to its own competitions. It still needs the support of the esports community as a whole, and unless it gets game publishers on its side, it is unlikely to succeed in the long term. Unlike traditional sports, which aren't technically owned by anyone, esports rely on video games, the rights of which belong to publishers. Because of the fact that esports are still dependent on game publishers, it's difficult for any governing body to set unified rules. However, country-specific governing bodies, such as the Korea eSports Association, have done a great job of setting standards and representing the rights of players. Thanks to the Korea eSports Association, esports competitors in South Korea now have a minimum salary, and there are restrictions on the minimum terms of players' contracts. These changes have been mirrored by other countries for fear that the best esports talent would relocate to South Korea. Teams. Esports are generally a team sport, and while there are professional video game players who have achieved a lot of success on their own, most of the top players belong to a team. Esports teams, just like in professional sports, are individual entities that can sign players to contract and enter their best players into tournaments. Unlike regular sports teams, however, most esports teams compete across multiple competitions and games. The biggest esports teams include teams like Liquid, Cloud9, FaZe Clan, and Fnatic. Depending on the game, different numbers of players will be needed, with most games needing around 5 players. The teams themselves may hire lots of different players who all compete across multiple games. Players need to train extensively to play at the highest level, and Team Liquid, as an example, will train around 50 hours per week. Coaches are also an important part of every team, and players regularly spend a lot of time analyzing game footage and practicing to improve on certain areas and create new strategies. Coaches need to have extensive knowledge of the game and will usually have past experience playing professionally. Some of the bigger esports teams may also hire sports psychologists. A lot of success in esports comes from being calm under pressure, and at the highest level, a psychologist can be a tremendous help in performing in a finals match. Sports psychologists may also be able to alleviate the problems of stress and burnout that many esports professionals encounter. A lot of professional video game players will have relatively short careers due to intensive training and poor mental health that can result from dealing with the stress of competing. For team-based games, an esports team will create a roster of players for matches. They will also have an alternate team which will be made up of reserve players. Some teams may enter both their reserve and first teams into a tournament. But in most cases, the reserve team will be kept in case one of the players in the first team needs replacing. Each member of a team will typically have a set role, just like athletes in team sports each have a position and role on the pitch. Depending on the exact game being played, these roles can be slightly different. Generally though, there will usually be a damage dealer, a defensive player, a support, a specialist, and a scout. One player will also be the captain, and they will instruct the other players on the appropriate strategy during the game. For an esports team to be successful, it needs to be winning tournaments regularly to bring in prize money. Most of the biggest esports teams will also be sponsored by various brands which want to increase their brand presence amongst esports fans. As in other sports, team revenue will depend largely on how successful the team is. More success in competitions means more prize money and more interest from fans and sponsors. The most well-known esports teams with the biggest sponsors aren't necessarily the ones with the most wins, however. Some teams divide their time between competing in tournaments and engaging with fans. These teams have shown that building a fan base by creating content and interacting with fans can be just as important for building success and sponsorship revenue.
Bonjour, my name is Romain Bijard and I'm the team manager for Unicorns of Love. Unicorns of Love is a pro gaming organization based in Berlin, and 5 of our employees have a really weird job. They are pro gamers, meaning they earn money by playing video games. What is the business model of a pro team? So a team like Unicorns of Love has an income around $500,000 to $1 million per year. This money is mostly coming from Riot, sponsors, a bit of merchandising, so we are selling stuff online. We are not getting money from prize pool, so that's a fake idea some people have about esports, is you are earning money by winning tournaments. Yes and no, you're winning tournaments so it makes you famous, but the money you're winning through those tournaments are most of the time for players and not really for the team. So forget about the prize pool. So that's more or less how we are getting the money. How are we spending the money at Unicorns of Love? For example, we have 5 players with 5 different nationalities, which are employees, we have to pay them. We have a coach in charge of the game and what's happening in-game. We also have a manager, which is in charge of everyone outside of the game. So it's me, for example, for Unicorns of Love. My job is basically to make sure we have money, we are good on social media, they sleep well, they eat well, they train. We do the administrative stuff, all the logistics around events, when do you leave, what do you sleep, stuff like this. So you also have a CEO. In our company it's a bit specific because the CEO is actually the dad of Shippy. So we are a really family-based company. I mean, the more and more competitive esports is coming, the more you need people, right? You're gonna need a lawyer to do your contracts, you're gonna need social media, someone in charge to do videos, someone in charge to do the content, you're gonna need a cook maybe, you're gonna need a lot of different stuff. And it helps team to actually take better care of players. This is why we need more and more staff to take better care of our players. So we need more money to pay that. If you go back to our table, you can see we could get more money from Riot, from sponsors, or from merchandising. Merchandising is only going to get bigger if you keep winning, because you get exposure. So most logically, the money is going to come from either Riot or sponsors. What seems obvious answer would be, you should get more money from sponsors. The problem is, we have a limited reach in esports, so sponsors' money cannot reach millions. To understand that, we're going to dive a bit into marketing. A marketing department into a company is usually here to create value on your product. You're going to try to put your product in the light so people are interested and are going to come and buy it. You are basically going to turn the money from your marketing department into reach, into people. You are going to spread awareness around your product. And eSport actually has a sexy reach because our players are young. Our players are between 15 to 20. Now the game starts to be a bit old, so I would say 15 to 25. They are mostly male, and there are a lot of them. So it's really interesting for brands to be able to talk to you as early as possible about their products. Talking about sponsors, I see two different kinds of sponsors into esports. The first kind are going to be endemic sponsors, so they have been here forever, like they were there at the start of esports. It's gonna be all the sponsors with stuff directly connected to a gamer. So when you sit behind the computer, I'm talking about keyboard, mouse, headset, computers, screen, chairs, table, food, drinks, everything you can eat, glasses, software, whatever, this kind of stuff. So they have been sponsoring esports for a long time now. We are not talking about brands the size of Apple or Google, for example. So they have a limited marketing budget. Non-endemic sponsors, same, they have a limited budget, but their budget is way bigger. I'm talking about Coca-Cola, or one of the last big brands known was Gillette, for example, sponsoring ESL. We have a slow transition from endemic to non-endemic, and this bump of money is definitely going to help teams, but for the long term, it cannot be our business model backbone, sponsoring. It's not possible. It does not matter if you are an endemic sponsor or a non-endemic sponsor. I don't believe you have enough money to finance the esports teams. Esports teams are not able to handle millions of euros of sponsoring. If tomorrow Red Bull is coming to Unicorns of Love and give us 10 million of sponsoring, I'm actually going to advise them against it, because I'm going to say it's a lot of money and we cannot turn this money into enough reach for you. An esports team is a limited share of this reach, because when you die in this target, in this reach I was talking about, 15-25, you have those movie, music, video games. You have the esport, let's go into esport. In esport you have a couple of games. You have League of Legends, yes, but you also have Dota, Counter-Strike, Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, a lot of them. You select League of Legends, and in League of Legends you have to select one region, because you have tournaments in Japan, Korea, Australia, Europe, North America, Brazil, Turkey, everywhere. So you select Europe, and in the 10 best team you have Unicorns of Love. So that was a long journey to explain you our reach is limited. Esport is booming, esport is really big, boom, business, but still the share of reach we get as team is limited. Europe is more than 20 languages and even more countries linked to it. So when you're selling reach, when you're interested into buying reach, you have different attempts. In the US, it's kind of easier for a team to sit down around the negotiation table and to get money from sponsors. In Europe, let's say I sit with a French sponsor, he's selling a French product, so he would like to reach out to French people. So his first question is going to be, how big is your French reach? And I'm going to try to explain him, my team is amazing because we have a Russian, we have a German, we have 2 Koreans, and we have a Spanish. But at the end of the day, we play European League, so you know, we talk a bit to French people, kind of, but they're not always going to understand that. So it's taking time, and we are, I think, doing a better job at the moment to get to explain sponsors why our reach is awesome, but still, it's easier for the NA than for us. So one of the solutions Riot designed, tailored to get some revenue sharing from North America, is turning their league into a franchising system. So at the moment, all the teams in the league are playing the same tournament, and if you are bad, you have chances to get relegated, demoted. A franchising system is cancelling that. Basically, you have to buy your slot in the leagues, and you're gonna stay there. It's a model which works for baseball, basketball, hockey in the US, for example. So sponsors already know how it works. They know if you invest in a franchise team, you're going to work for like 1, 2, 3, 4 years with them. So it's way better for sponsors. Where in Europe, with a promotion system, you can be demoted and basically you're going to lose your sponsors. So it's harder to build trust with sponsors in a non-franchise system. On the other hand, an up and down system creates a lot more stories, a lot more drama, because this team was supposed to qualify and they failed and stuff like this. What's going to happen to Europe? That's a really good question. And I trust Riot to give us the best answer possible they have. I mean, so far they have been unlimitedly committing to esports. So 2018 is going to be a really interesting year. What are they going to do? Esport now the esport department needs to give teams more money. As I explained earlier, teams are growing and we need a sustainable income which cannot come from sponsors. So Riot needs to find a way to give us more money. Let's go in England to check how football clubs are actually earning money. So basically, they are selling their rights, all the clubs, they give their rights to one company. This company is going to TV channels and those TV channels have to buy the rights to have the football clubs on their channels. And those TV channels later will earn money through advertising from you, from the rich. And that way you have a sustainable income, because the more interesting football is going to be, the more people are going to watch and the more money is going to come to the team. If you apply this model to League of Legends, it puts Riot in the center. So Riot would be this company taking a right and selling it to TV channels, which is what they are about to do for 2018. They recently signed a deal with a company called BAMTech, and BAMTech got those rights, so they're going to be in charge to sell them. I think a second way to get money would be to actually get the skin money. But for that, you would need internally at Riot to find a way to analyze how much esport is actually impacting League of Legends and what's going to happen tomorrow if esport is gone. The easiest way to make our job easier is actually you, the rich. The more you are going to talk to people, the more esport is going to have people watching it and listening to it and discussing it. And basically this dream is going to be for me or any other manager to sit around the negotiation table with a sponsor, and the sponsors will have heard already from esports. So that's going to be way easier for me to explain what we're doing. I strongly believe esports is the future of entertainment. Why? Because our population are more and more connected, and you have an unlimited ocean of possibilities when you use a video game tool to have entertainment and tournament and fights, for example. So it's you, basically. Esport needs you, and we need you to talk about esport.
Leagues and events. Esports events can normally be grouped into two separate categories. These are leagues and tournaments. Most leagues follow a traditional relegation and promotion format, which is commonly seen in regular sports across the world. The best players in a league will be promoted to the next level, while teams at the bottom will be relegated to the league below. This format helps the best teams rise to the top and rewards teams for continued improvements by giving higher rewards. However, some esports organizations have opted to follow a franchise league format more commonly seen in North American sports. In this form of competition, there is no promotion or relegation, and the same top teams always play each other every season. Players can be traded between teams or signed as free agents or signed from other leagues. This format is more attractive to a lot of investors as there's no danger of a team losing revenue due to being relegated. Some of the biggest esports leagues are now based on the franchise format, including the Overwatch League, the FIFA eMLS, and the Call of Duty League. While traditional league formats provide more opportunities for smaller esports teams, they are much less attractive to sponsors and investors which don't want to invest in a team only to see it get relegated into relative obscurity. Riot Games recently changed their North American League of Legends League to the franchise format. This change means that teams wanting to be included in the league will need to pay $10 million to receive a permanent place. Teams will be kept in the league regardless of performance, but there are financial incentives for higher placing teams. All players in the league will also have a minimum salary of $75,000, which is set by the league. The nature of sport is competition, though, and for many fans, a sports league without relegation and promotion just doesn't make sense. Ultimately, it comes down to where fans are located for which system they usually prefer. North American fans are usually much more used to franchise systems, as this is how the majority of regular sports operate in their countries. For European and Asian fans, relegation and promotion are a normal part of following sports and part of what makes sports so exciting. Tournaments are one of the biggest esports events on the calendar and will often feature some of the largest prize pools and viewing figures. The tournaments will typically involve multiple qualifying rounds before a finals event that can draw in thousands of in-person fans and millions of fans watching the live stream from around the world. Some of the world's biggest esports tournaments include the Fortnite World Cup, League of Legends World Championship, the International and the Intel Extreme Masters. Some of these tournaments can have prize pools worth tens of millions of dollars. Generally, they'll be open to any team to enter, and some will allow individual players to enter if they are a non-team game-based game. The prize pool for these competitions often come largely from the game publishers themselves, who will see the competition as a great way of building the game's fan base and encouraging more people to play. Sponsors and advertisers may also provide prizes to help promote their brand to the fans watching the events. Game publishers. As we've already seen, video game publishers are one of the most important aspects of esports and often have a controlling stake in the biggest tournaments. These organizations own the rights for any company or person to make money off of their game, so any event or tournament will need to pay royalty fees to the publisher. For a lot of game publishing companies, esports provide advertising for their games, and as such, you might expect them to allow independent esports events to feature their games without requiring payment. Esports have been shown to drastically increase the lifespan of a game, with one of the most obvious cases being League of Legends. League of Legends was released by Riot Games back in 2009. It was completely free to play, though it includes microtransactions such as the ability to purchase new characters. When League of Legends first came out, the developers intended it for a serious gaming audience and never expected it to have mainstream appeal. The game featured a lot of in-depth strategy and a steep learning curve, which made it harder for casual players to get into. However, the fact that the game was free saw it amass huge numbers of downloads, and it soon became highly popular. Part of this popularity was due to the strong competitive community that developed around the game, and it soon became the most popular esports game in the world. The success of League of Legends and Riot's work in creating League of Legends tournaments is a large part of the success of esports in Europe and North America. League of Legends having a strong competitive community helped to bring more fans to the game, leading to more downloads of microtransactions. More than 10 years after its release, League of Legends continues to be one of the most played video games and is one of the most popular games on Twitch. The success of League of Legends is supporting the developers long after the game's initial release has led to many other video game publishers adopting a similar model. Some of the biggest games are now released for free and are supported completely by optional in-game purchases. Many publishers also see the value in building their games around the competitive video gaming community and creating tournaments and leagues based on their games. esports are entirely dependent on game publishers in a way that no other sport can compare to. As no one officially owns the sport of football, people are free to play it as they like. Unfortunately, the restrictions imposed by game publishers are having a constricting effect on the growth of the sport. While it's only normal for video game publishers to want to make a return on their investment into the games, there has to be some freedom for event organizers and content creators to use the games to further the popularity and awareness of esports around the world. Esports events. Esports events are what the entire industry revolves around. When we talk about the fans, the players, and the organizations themselves, they all center around watching, playing in, or holding events. As such, event planning, management, and execution are some of the most important skills to have if you're involved in the esports industry. Just as with traditional sports, there's a strong focus around live events, and if you want to work in esports, understanding how the events work is important. No matter what the level of competition will be, it's important to understand the basic principles of event management and what goes into hosting an esports event in the modern day. In this chapter, we'll be taking a closer look at esports events, including everything that goes on. We'll look at what event planners have to be mindful of and how to create a successful event that leaves the fans with positive memories. Crucially, this chapter will also be looking at how an esports event creates revenue and remains profitable. You'll also be looking more closely at how esports events have adapted to changes over the years and how those changes have led to the massive success of today. The chapter will also be looking at how esports events can be compared to traditional sporting events and whether in the future we may see mega events like the Olympics, but built around esports. Hosting an event. Esports are incredibly varied, and so are esports events. Some tournaments bring in hundreds of millions of viewers from around the world, while others are more focused on smaller, niche audiences. If you want to host an esports event, you'll need to consider your audience first. What kind of viewers are you aiming for, and how will you reach them? Hosting an esports event brings with it a lot of challenges that you won't really find in traditional sports. The first of these is that esports is still relatively niche, and depending on which country you're based in, finding fans who want to attend your event in person can be difficult. You'll need to make sure that you're aware of the current trends in esports. Over time, games change in popularity, and changes to the games can also affect how well received they are by players and fans. Generally, if you have chosen a popular game, it won't be too difficult to attract fans of that game, provided the marketing efforts are well planned. The dilemma that many esports event organizers have is how to attract new fans to the sport and how to encourage casual esports viewers to attend events in person. A lot of esports events will now feature additional entertainment, such as a performance from a band or music artist. Ultimately, event organizers are looking to create a fun atmosphere and provide fans with enough action to keep them entertained throughout the event. Depending on the game used for the event, the production for the event may vary widely. The recent trend in Battle Royale games, which feature up to 100 players, has become something of a headache for esports event organizers. It's difficult to portray the action from the perspective of all players, and numerous Battle Royale esports events have missed key moments while another player is being shown on the main screen. Having a large number of players all playing at once also means a higher cost to supply all of the computer equipment. Normally, for games that require a maximum of 5 players on each team, only 10 computers are needed. If you plan on hosting an event featuring more players, costs will be higher and you may also need a larger venue. When it comes to the venue, choosing the right location is important. Most major esports events are held in cities that have a strong history of support for video game competition, with large cities providing one of the best places for finding plenty of esports fans all in one place. The venue chosen will depend a lot on the size of the event, and it's important to make sure that a stage can be set up. The stage is the center of the event and will need to support all the players and equipment. Large viewing screens are also an essential part of any esports events. Without them, fans in the arena won't be able to see any of the action. Marketing is an important part of any esports event, as it will help to bring in the fans and revenue. Inviting famous streamers and esports professionals is a great way to build attention to an event, and some of the bigger esports events have started to also invite celebrities to tournaments to help raise the profile amongst people who might not be familiar with esports. The FIFA Esports Premier League Invitational was a great example of this. It featured some of the UK's top professional footballers going head-to-head on the virtual football pitch and brought mainstream attention to esports in the UK.
My name is Emil, also known as Ansvar. I work as the in-game director or head of server during the Face It Global Summit.
So it's 2 versus 4.
Good, going for number 4 in 3, 2.
PRC are pushing. I can take Rogi and Rusty Zera.
I'm pretty much the one that decides what goes out, when does it go out, how does it go out. And then on top of that, I have 6 observers, as well as a map stream. We have one guy that is a designated overview. He's supposed to give us the cinematic shots, while the rest of them are kind of fluid. They're there basically to catch as much of the action and spread out as good as possible. So if we don't catch it live, we want it as a replay.
And C as well, it's gonna go up there. AG is driving closer.
Yeah,
now.
I'm on one.
Yeah, going on 1.
Wow.
Yeah, call that as a highlight. Yeah, I didn't get it. Highlight on 1.
The hardest part with observing would be the decision making on what to show, when to show it, and also you have the fact that people need to be there before it happens. You have to kind of predict what ridge will they pass, what house will they be shot from.
Yeah, can we get that intersection, somebody? Up by...
Yeah, I'm on Vard right now.
I got it.
I'm on Vard.
Wow.
He might stop.
Go
He's
for
stopping.
Number 1.
Action on me.
Going for number 5.
When there's several teams that you kind of want to keep an eye on, it's always depending on where do you have the observers. If we're on a less important fight from the beginning, we will sometimes decide to showcase that just because we don't want to jump into the middle of something without give them an explanation. Where are we? Where are they fighting? How are they fighting? If you just go in without knowing how the area looks, you're kind of lost as a viewer. Before the games, I usually talk a little bit to the casters. I tell them, oh, we'll focus on these 4 teams or these 5 teams at the beginning, give you an overview so you can present them. And then it's kind of give and take. Sometimes I will give them what to talk about, and sometimes I'll respect that they're talking about something and then give them the footage of it. So it's a very important collaboration that has to work, because if it doesn't, you'll have a flawed stream and the viewer won't really, you know, if the caster and the footage you're watching doesn't add up 90% of the time, it's not worth watching, in my opinion. This event gave us a really, really good start, so we didn't really feel like we had any issues when we came into the first game of the day, and I feel that it showed when you looked at the broadcast, because sure, I have input on what we can do better, but as a first day, I'm just super happy, and I couldn't be more happy to work for Faceit out of all TOs.
Yeah, I'm on you. Yeah, got it, number 5. Good start, lads. Good first game, good first game.
How esports events have changed. As you might remember from our previous chapter on the history of esports, it wasn't that long ago that esports events were completely different from how they are today. From the first ever competition in 1972, where competitors could win a subscription to Rolling Stone magazine, to the events today that are watched by millions and feature millions of dollars in prizes. One of the biggest changes has been the introduction of purpose-built arenas. These esports arenas have been built and designed to give fans the best possible experience within the arena. Purpose-built arenas mean that esports organizers don't need to rely on booking venues that may not be suited to the competitions, and events be held more easily and more often. Countries like South Korea and China were behind the construction of the first ever esports arenas, and once the sport started to grow in Europe and North America, other countries also followed suit. Esports went from being held in arcades and small venues to selling out dedicated arenas to thousands of fans. The presence of newly built esports arenas shows the demand from fans for live entertainment and represents the enormous growth of the sport in a short space of time. With purpose-built arenas, esports organizations are able to make more revenue from ticket sales and save costs on renting out venues. This, in turn, allows for bigger prize pools and more talent on display for the fans to enjoy. For a long time, unlike in traditional sports, arenas weren't usually owned by the teams themselves, but instead are owned by a private company or by an esports governing body or company. In the next few years, however, that could be changing. As esports seek to become more professionalized, a lot of the bigger leagues are looking to traditional sports for inspiration. The Overwatch League recently announced that it would require teams to be based in the city they represent. Any teams competing in the league will need to have an arena within the city in order to host away teams. This change to the rules of one of the biggest esports competitions could soon be mirrored by other organizations, and many esports teams are starting to invest in building their own arenas. Philadelphia Fusion has planned their own $50 million arena, the cost of which will be covered by Comcast, the team's owner and principal investor. In the future, most major esports teams will likely have their own arenas or at least share an arena with a team in the same city. As teams will be able to make more money from tickets, there will be more incentive than ever to build complex arenas that seat thousands of fans. The amount of money on offer for esports event winners is another aspect that has increased dramatically over the past few years. In 2010, the total prize pool for esports was just over $5 million. By 2019, this figure had risen to a massive $211 million. That's more than a 4,000 increase in less than a decade. Quite a remarkable rise. These big prize pools mean that more players than ever are drawn to the world of competitive video gaming, and so the talent pool gets larger. As a talent pool increases, the standard of players also increases, and fans can enjoy esports at an even higher level than ever before. A few years ago, a lot of players with the potential to go pro might have given up on their dreams due to the relatively low rewards. Now, as top prizes, salaries and sponsorship opportunities increase, more players will take the risk and commit to playing full-time in an effort to turn professional. Esports at the Olympics. One of the biggest debates surrounding esports is whether it can truly consider itself as a sport. Despite now having more mainstream appeal than ever before and featuring on sports channels such as ESPN, the idea that video games can be a sport is laughable to some. Most people would consider esports as a competition or mind sport rather than a true sport. Despite this, esports do require a lot of intense training and physical preparation. Most of the top players will follow careful diet plans and exercise routines to ensure they stay healthy and alert even when sitting and playing for long periods of time. Researchers from Australia also found that some of the top esports competitors had a similar mental toughness and ability to cope with stress as top Olympic athletes. The link between esports and the Olympics doesn't end there, though. Recently, there has been a lot of global attention on esports, and in 2017, the International Olympic Committee spoke about how esports could be considered a sporting activity. At the time, there were no plans to feature esports at the Olympics, partly due to the violent nature of shooter games. The Olympics is clear about its message of peace and inclusiveness, and there are some thoughts that violent video games could potentially conflict with this message. If esports do make it to the Olympics, it's more likely to be sports games that are played. In 2018, Intel, an Olympic sponsor, held an esports event at the Pyeongchang Winter Games in collaboration with the IOC. The goal of the tournament was to gauge fan reactions to the events and also to demonstrate to the IOC the potential of esports being included in the Olympics in the future. 18 of the best StarCraft II players from around the world competed for a $150,000 prize pool. While the potential awards weren't as great as some of the other tournaments, there was a lot of excitement around it being an event closely tied to the Olympics. Esports were also featured at the 2018 Asian Games in Indonesia. While events weren't counted towards the final medal tally, it still allowed for esports competitors to take center stage at a major international tournament and brought more attention to professional video games. The plan was for esports to be included as a full event at the 2022 Asian Games in China, but for now, medals still won't be awarded until there is a single international governing body. This will no doubt be a blow to esports, which have been making good progress on becoming an internationally recognized sport. While Intel will be holding another esports competition in the lead up to the Tokyo Olympic Games, the IOC is also reluctant to include events without a single governing body in charge of unifying the sport and setting rules. If an organization such as the World Esports Association can become the single regulatory body of the competition, it could be that esports will become part of the Olympics in the future. If it ever does happen, however, games will be limited to sports-based games. That means that popular titles such as Dota 2, StarCraft 2, League of Legends, and Counter-Strike won't be allowed. As these are some of the most exciting and popular titles in the world of esports, there are fears that esports wouldn't be as popular as an Olympic event. If esports is to really gain mainstream appeal, the Olympics is a great route. However, for now, at least, it seems like this won't be possible. The alternative solution is for esports to create its own mega event. As the sport grows bigger around the world, there's more potential to hold a massive, multidiscipline event that takes the best gamers from each country and sees them challenge each other. Fans can find out the best country in the world at esports, and players will be able to compete on the world stage. This way, esports doesn't have to worry about IOC restrictions and can pave its own success.
What is esports? And more importantly, should it become an Olympic event? Well, we have an answer from the president of the International Olympic Committee himself. And Thomas Bach says, it's too soon to tell. Bach admits the physical activity in competitive gaming is in some areas comparable to traditional sports, and that esports is big competition for the sports industry, especially when it comes to attracting younger audiences. On the other hand, the IOC has issues with the violence in a lot of the games, which doesn't really represent Olympic values. Plus, the popularity of games changes so quickly, it would be hard to nail one down for an event, not to mention maintaining consistency for developing athletes every 4 years. And for those reasons, Bach says there needs to be more research and more discussion to figure out whether e-gaming can be considered an Olympic sport. It's an interesting debate because the esports industry is continuing to explode. Back in 2013, the US government even recognized League of Legends players as pro athletes, so international players could get working visas to compete there. And the prize money you win at an esports competition is comparable to traditional sports, and in many cases surpasses them. Some esport athletes take home millions of dollars a year. Not to mention the industry is expected to generate over $1 billion by 2020. What do you think about esports becoming an Olympic event? Is it too soon to tell?